Documentary filmmakers and or cameramen. What was the most fricked up experience you had during or behind the scenes? NSW. I was freelancing between film jobs by shooting segments for Inside Edition. On the way to an interview, the producer, who wrote his interview questions in the car on the way over, kept talking about how he had to make this woman cry. They love it upstairs when you can make them cry, he said. It's the gold ring. So we go to this woman's house, get the gear inside, set up the interview and start rolling. It turns out this woman saw her husband and son killed in front of her when the motorcycle they were riding on was hit by a drunk driver. The segment was about drunk drivers who had killed people and gotten away scot-free. This guy ran to Canada and he still lived there 10 years later. The producer asked a lot of tear-jerkingly emotional questions and finally got her to cry. It was heartbreaking. As we drove away, he all but high-fived himself. He was so happy. On Strange Universe, the producer wanted my sound person to drive the van through a funeral procession so we could shoot it from up close, out the side door. We said no. Where do they get these people? My husband was doing a documentary for college and we were filming next to a museum and a guy told us, "Are you cops? Stop filming us, this is a drug dealing place." We thought he was joking. Turns out, it was truth. They surrounded us and were very violent. Thankfully, my husband kept calm, explained that it was something for college and he'd delete the scene. I was pregnant and then one of them realized that it was impossible for us to be cops, so he calmed the others and told us leave. We ran out of there. It was very scary. You sound like you were very lucky. Drug dealers are either crazy nice or freaking crazy. We had an episode of Hoarders where a long dead cat was discovered, and another where an obese man said he'd like to clear the walkway to his front door so that EMT could get to him in case he had a heart attack or his wife tried to stab him. He said both things nonchalantly as though they were ordinary and totally normal events that happened to him routinely. His wife was a total jerk. There was also the man with an enormous scrotum who used it as a table when eating. Not sure if that made the final cut. I'm not a documentary filmmaker per se, but I have made short documentaries in the past. One of the worst was when I was interviewing someone with schizophrenia. The whole point of the project was to show how we're not so different and to try to curb the stigma around mental illness. Anyway, this guy walked up right after we finished filming and asked what we were doing. I told him, and in front of the woman with schizophrenia, he started saying all this crap about how all people with mental illnesses are dangerous, and how I should be careful because she might attack me. It was all kinds of messed up. So I told him to frick off and he was somehow offended at me. I knew from stories I had heard from a bunch of people how bad stigma can be, but I had never seen it quite like that. Crazy stuff. Ooh ugh. I have schizoaffective disorder and I get that crap all the time. People just somehow don't think stigma like this exists. Unfortunately it does. My first roommate in college, I told her I had something like schizophrenia, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Are you gonna kill me in my sleep?" Just got turned down for another roommate because he found out I had schizophrenia. So done. Thanks for sticking up for us. By the way, I never thought I would tell this story for lack of opportunity to warrant it. So back in late 80s I worked for a local television station in Paducah, Kentucky. We were hosting the whatever annual Children's Miracle Network live. I was running the remote or bunny cam as we sometimes called it. I would go around the studio audience and get bumper shots or reaction shots or whatever the director yelled in my headset to get. About midway through the evening during one of those exhausting montage vignettes showing kids in need of help, I took a rest off to the side of the audience. Little did I know that my cam was giving the control room an impromptu upskirt of a not at all unattractive woman. It could have easily been the elderly lady in the seat behind her if I was sitting on the next step up. Noting went live thankfully, although they might have seen a spike in donations if it had. They let it go on I guess until I asked what they were all giggling and talking about. Once they told me, my face went to 13 shades of red as I slowly backed right on out of there before anyone had suspicions. I passed the remote cam to someone else to take over and I jumped on one of the fixed studio cams never to look back. I never lived it down. LOL. When this crazy hobo accused me of filming him, he thought I was a cop but I was just getting B-roll and he chased me into a bar. This might be the only story on here that I can believe. I used to shoot and edit short docs for NGOs that did water well work overseas. Burkina Faso was the most remote location out of all the trips I had taken. We stayed in a small dirt village a few hours from the capital, then drove another 2 hours every morning to get to our locations. Anyway, we met this witch doctor who brought us to his small mud house. We asked if we could film B-roll inside, but he was being super hostile and wanted something valuable in return. We argued back and forth for a bit through our translator but had no luck. Then the witch doctor told us he would approach the spirits and ask them if it was okay for us to come in. He went inside his shrine and started shaking this bead shaker and talking to someone. We could hear both voices, completely different sounding, and at times talking over each other. This went on for a few minutes. Then he came out and asked us to drink this potion if we wanted to go in. Our guide suggested we don't, but we had come this far, so we each took little sips. He met with the spirits one more time, then finally let us in. It was a dark mud room, no bigger than the size of a queen bed, with a single beam of light coming through. He showed us his dolls and medicine, also razor blades that he would use to make cuts on children's bellies and stuff medicine into. Saw some gnarly scars that trip too, but the whole time I was looking for a voice box or recorder to explain the phoniness of the spirits but found nothing. Kind of gave me the creeps. Was hired through a friend to shoot a basic music video that had been scripted by the band. They literally need just camera operators. So we turn up at this old townhouse, still not knowing anything about what's about to happen, and are greeted by a lady dressed in a silk bathrobe with her face painted bright yellow. Okay, cool. As we walk in, this man pops his head out and his face is bright green. He's in his underpants. Okay, this could still be a video, I guess. Anyway, we're setting up, still totally confused, and in walks Jesus, complete with a crown of thorns and a nappy. We're now very much suspicious. This is weird P. Turns out it was just an eclectic music video. The official release got 30k views on YT, and later that year they played with a regional philharmonic. It was still going to be P until we left though. Former camera operator AV tech for live events here. It was an annual banquet. Everyone had to be in a boatie including me, which usually I get away wearing black polo and khakis at anything, but not this time. I was basically filming the speakers, awards ceremony, auction, etc. As I was packing up, people who remained there were the high-end socialites of the city I was in, and they were freaking wasted. One table in particular I kept hearing, "Naru, oh no, come on Jay," and a trophy wife was sucking this well-known local attorney's dong under the table in front of everyone. It wasn't the first interesting incident. Seen a Republican congressman make out with another dude at a country club. It was his actual boyfriend, but to the public he was still in the closet. What's amazing is how the scandalous drama among socialites never make local or national news more often. Had to sit through the crime pics of the antics of Romanovich Chikatilo, Russian serial killer. His choice of lunchtime body parts was particularly grueling. I think it is important that we don't ignore that things like this happen. It may be horrible to look at these pics, but that tells you that you aren't insane and has probably instilled a deep hate for crimes like these in you. Part of a camera crew filming a documentary in a business. Female employee had pranked a male employee's car. He became violent when he confronted her, so we had to restrain him. I got to hit him with the boom mic, which was rather satisfying as nobody really liked him. You know the rules, Brian. No interacting with the subjects. Not a cameraman or filmmaker, but I work in the television industry and had to digitize an old cassette from a police confession or something like that. It was for a show that was all about survivors of killers, and the guy was admitting what he did, who he killed, where they are, all details. Wouldn't be so bad, but we didn't really have the equipment to do it. So I had to listen to the full 2 hours of the confession because it kept cutting out while recording and would have to be restarted. It was fricked up how casual he was explaining how he killed people and crap. By the end of the interview he was begging for the death sentence. Was really fricked up to hear. I worked for a local online media network in a small mountain town in Colorado. Midget wrestling came to town and I covered the event with my on-air host. She was and still is a really cute blonde girl. Anyway, we were interviewing the midget wrestlers up in the green room, manager's office, at the top of this country bar. My host starts to interview this one midget and he starts yelling at her and trying to inch his way closer to her. She then turns to another midget to talk to him and the angry midget just starts sniffing her hair for like the whole other interview. The dude was on drugs, no doubt. Probably coke. But anyways, the host and I noped out of there as soon as we could. I thought I was gonna have to jump in and save her from being molested by this guy. So weird. Not a news cameraman, but my buddy was. One evening in Southern California, a retiree refused to accept his family's plan to put him in a home. He barricaded himself in his house, just blocks from my house, and threatened the police with gunfire. The police responded by firing tear gas canisters through the windows. I watched the whole scene. My buddy arrived with his news crew and started filming. After the old man was dragged away in cuffs, my buddy wanted to get a post-mortem close-up shot of a broken window. We got up close to the window just as the police turned on a huge fan to disperse all the tear gas inside the house. The tear gas shot through that 4-inch hole in a huge shaft of gas, directly into our faces. My buddy got it good, and so did I. We fell on the lawn, rubbing our eyes and blowing mucus all over the place. The cops thought it was hilarious. No idea if the news actually used the shot. The only set I've worked on is my So's full-length film. She co-wrote, co-directed and stars in it. They're still editing it, and intend to hit up film festivals ASAP. I did whatever they needed me to do, with no experience. Some nights I held a makeshift boom mic, other nights I was shopping in the background. Another night I hid behind the door with a light and just held it open so they could get their shot. Real indie, no budget, but it's been fun. Shooting schedule was weird as it was only nights and weekends and heavily depended on who was around and when. This night was where the other co-director was making his only cameo as a homeless man that's taking a crap on the subway, and the way things worked out, we were pulling an all-nighter. I got to hold the camera for this scene. Early morning, most of the subway cars are pretty empty. For anyone not in NYC, bars close at 4 AM, so filming at 4:30 AM on the train, you get people that are still drunk and making their way home. Co-director, Rob, is wrapping up his shot and turns to come back to our end of the car when 3 really drunk guys think that Rob's actually homeless and is afraid of them and try to lure him back over. It was weird. Rob politely stated that we were working on a film project and him turning around has nothing to do with them. When they start yelling at us to come back over, I don't know what they wanted, but so far, the only time I've been afraid on the subway. I was carrying equipment acting as guide grunt work for guys shooting high-risk skiing video near Alta, Utah. I mostly carried stuff and stood around a lot, but it paid well. One of the skiers was supposed to ski out off a rock cliff and land on a steep section below. It really wasn't much of a gigantic leap or anything. I could have done it myself. Still, he had to get a pretty good amount of speed up before he went off the cliff just to clear some rocks and land on the snow-covered steep part. He was a superb skier. There was nothing to it for this guy, except something went wrong. He sort of nearly stopped just as he went off the cliff. He dribbled off the 15-foot cliff and went headfirst into the boulder-sized rocks below. He got bloody and knocked out cold. Now the problem was getting him out of there. Long story short, I had a radio and called the ski patrol from the nearby ski resorts. No helicopter available. It took almost an hour for the patrol to get there. The guy had become conscious a few times but was definitely out of it. The patrol took him down the hill on the sled straight to a waiting ambulance. He was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. I ran into another of the skiers the summer after that and he said the guy was never quite the same after that. A bit of a speech slur and seemingly slowed thinking. No one quite figured out what had slowed him down so much, exactly at the wrong moment. I was acing on, not a documentary, but a short narrative film. We were in the middle of a take outside the entrance of a downtown bar when an old, homeless man cruises by on rascal scooter and asks loudly, "You'll wanna buy some diapers?" The AD said, "Sir, we are in the middle of a take. Please be quiet." And the guy responded with, "I don't give a frick," and kept on rolling. Best story in this thread. Stepdad worked on loads of shows for the BBC. Most fricked up would be difficult to say, but one of his fellow cameramen ended up dating the model hosting the show, Erica something. I am mainly a print journalist but had some TV and radio work years ago. I went to a war zone with a documentary filmmaker. He had the camera. I asked the questions. He couldn't speak the local language. There was a stationary train full of refugees. He suggested interviewing the children on it, get personally stories. It was good idea, but we did not have a predetermined narrative in mind. One of children we interviewed, a young girl around the age of 11 or 12. She had not any signs of puberty yet, but it was clear she was going to extremely beautiful. She was talking about what happened when war came. My brother had a collection of toy cars that he left behind, she explained. What did you leave behind? I followed. Suddenly her face contorted with grief as she said, my grandmother. It was so shattering to see her go from being a happy child given the situation to heartbroken. After we were done, my cameraman said, good, we broke her. For him tragedy was like a fruit to harvest. I was so disgusted with him. I just hadn't worked in TV enough, I guess. News videographer here. Worst thing I experienced on the job was arriving to a hit and run seconds before emergency crews arrived. Heard the call on the scanner at about 3:30 am about someone hit by a car. Figured what the heck. It was a slow night and head over even though I'm technically off shift. Pull up about a block to a half block back. On an alley side street so I'm not blocking the street, but can still see my news truck so I can keep an eye on it as well as get out of there fast if something else happens. Also lets me be a bit more discreet. First thing I see as I climb out and start getting gear ready is an empty street. Police cars and ambulance pulling up. Body of a female in the street. Male screaming and crying at the police to do something as they haul him over to the curb. I'm immediately shooting everything I can. Shoot and move. Shoot and move. Trying to be discreet by not running up and getting in people's faces, but still getting full coverage. I watch as the police tape off the area. The guy is crying on the curb. Paramedics load the girl up on the stretcher and I can tell on their faces it's not good. I position myself to get the shot of the ambulance racing off down the street with the lights going, and they do, for about 2 blocks. And then they slow down. Lights get turned off and they pull over to the side for a minute, and then drive off at normal speed. It's obvious why, and everyone there sees it and knows why, and in my head, all I can do is grin. Internally, BC the shot is beautiful. Straight down the road, sun just starting to make the horizon a nice pink to offset the darker streets. Ambulance hauling butt with its lights lighting everything up around it. I finish up my cover shots. Wave to the officer in charge that I need to get a comment. Even him saying we have no info is better than not clipping up at all. Get the usual comment. An incident happened. Too early to say any details. No further comment. I start packing up. And all of a sudden someone grabs my arm and yanks me around. It's the guy and he starts screaming at me. Did I get my entertainment? Am I happy yet freaking media jackal? He's borderline incoherent at this point from grief and alcohol. Cops quickly peel him off me and I got out of there pretty dang fast. What made the whole thing even more freaked up was I essentially just saw a woman die in the street. Got screamed at by her boyfriend for essentially just doing my job. And then on the ride back to the station was singing along with the radio and had waffles when I went home. None of it bothered me at all. And just BC if I don't say it. Someone will ask. Car that hit the girl was stolen and found ditched later that day. Police discovered the driver was some guy off his meds and didn't even know who he was when they picked him up. Much less who or where he was when he hit the girl. Or that he had even hit the girl. The guy and girl were both intoxicated and were wandering back and forth in the road. Hence the reason she was hit in the first place. I got a kudos from the head of the station for getting the scoop on the story since none of the other stations bothered to show up or staffed anyone at that time of the day, as well as how I handled the situation and how well the shots turned out. Specifically that ambulance shot. This isn't fricked up in the way OP intended, but it's still fricked up. I'm a former one-man band reporter. I shot, wrote and edited my stories. No fancy van or crew. I can't count how many non-live stand-ups or interviews on the street were ruined by the $% and the P nonsense. Some examples, not all mine. Apartment building fire with multiple families on the street crying. Someone drives by and yells F her in the P, interviewing the neighbor of a woman who police believe is being held at gunpoint by her drunk husband. Another driver swings by F her in the P. Another reporter I worked with, candlelight vigil, and someone runs into his camera shot and yells F her in the P. It stopped being funny years ago. Now you are just being rude. I worked on a documentary about Rikers Island, which is a very large jail just off the north part of Queens, NYC. The whole thing was surreal, but the worst part was the maternity ward where incarcerated mothers had a few hours a day to see their kids in a large acrylic cell. We had incredible access to everything. One of the executive producers was the niece of Rose Singer, whom the nursery is named after, and she became a member of the Board of Corrections of NYC shortly after. Other things that stand out: unannounced Teams meetings at 0600 where the main governing body of the island grilled the heads of each jail about incidents and things like amount of toilet paper their jail used that month. The smell of hardcore disinfectant and overwhelming body odor. The food was a lot of starchy pasta and soda. Extraction was the term used when officers went in as a team and removed an inmate by surprise, forced to find contraband. The officers patrolled the island on mountain bikes. They had water teams of boats, jet skis, and divers. La Guardia is only about 100 feet away at one point, so there are escape attempts, but the divers are there to rescue prisoners. There's a dangerous tidal pool called Heck Gate there. You enter by bridge. The producers made sandwiches in a cooler for everyone. I was cameraman for a series about strip clubs in the local area, Birmingham, UK. We filmed for about 8 weeks, spending most of our time behind the scenes, talking with the girls, getting a bit of insight into why they were strippers. For the most part, they were earning money for college etc. It was just about the least sexy thing I could imagine. Not my cup of tea. Couldn't get my head around why men would want to spend money, and so much money, at that, when all you could do is look. No touching, no happy finishes. After the first hour of filming, I was immune from any idea that I'd find it sexy. Not like I was spending every day walking around with a semi. Got to know the girls well. They were universally nice people, doing a job, and even the attractive ones. Once you know a bit about them, and why they were getting their tea out, it was as far from being a turn on as I could imagine. On the last day of filming, in the brightly lit changing rooms at the back of Legs 11, a female producer asked if I had ever had a private dance. No, I hadn't, and no, I didn't want one. Oh, we can't have that. Who's going to give slutty but fisted dance? He's never had one. They sat me in a chair, and with my sound man filming it, one of the girls did her private routine for me. Well, on me. Lots of gyrating, rubbing herself on my legs, then pulling her pants aside and getting an inch away from my nose. Christ, it was all in good humor, but it was frickin' weird, uncomfortable. I mean, where do you look? And everyone was watching me. I knew this girl. I'd filmed interviews with her and her kids. She wasn't my type, Sinu not my type, but she was a sweet person. And now she's putting on the sultry looks, sticking her nethers in my face. And I had an audience, a dozen other girls, mostly naked, my producer, my sound man, our production assistant, all standing round watching and laughing. I didn't know where to look. In hindsight, I think I did a good job of playing along, acting the right sort of jocular cringy ha ha ha, isn't this uncomfortable thing. But in reality it just all felt a bit fricked up, and the room was so frickin' bright. Not exactly nightmare stuff, but occasionally it does freak me out to remember that somewhere, sitting on a shelf in the TV station's archives, there's a digibeta tape of my private dance. My second most weird experience was earlier in the series. We were filming a husband and wife who had set up a business doing live internet P stuff from their home. After filming a sequence where the wife showed how they cleaned their toys, dildos etc each day in their dishwasher, in the kitchen, the producer and the wife went into the other room to chat about stuff, and the husband came over to me and said, "Hey, slutty but fist, my wife thought it could be quite cool for you to join us one night. Want to shag her?" I actually thought about it for a split second. Hadn't got a girlfriend at the time, but my overriding thought was I'm going to say no. But how do I turn down the offer politely? Oh, geez. Is my face looking horrified crap? What expression is on my face right now? No soap, Dishwasher gets pretty hot, so is a good way to sanitize silicone. Or abs, I suppose, as a lot of building bricks made of abs can be washed similarly. Useful in communities where a ton of adult toys are common, but I suppose it's one of those niche things. Oh, I've got a lot. I was a camera op for Shipping Wars on A&E. My £600. Life for TLC, Northwoods Law for Animal Planet, and High Profits for CNN, and others. Probably the worst was on my £600. Life. One family was moving out of their apartment, and we were shooting the move. They were very unsanitary. Instead of cleaning up their dog crap in the small 2-bedroom apartment, they would put plants on top of it. We had to use a mentholatum oil on our upper lips to withstand the stench. The grandma was sleeping on a bed in one of the bedrooms. When they went to remove the bed and flipped it over, thousands of bugs scattered out of the bed all over the room. The 80-something-year-old woman was sleeping on a bed that was infested with roaches and God knows what other bugs. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. I'm also directing and shooting my own documentary about cluster headaches, aka suicide headaches. Watching someone in that amount of pain will change your life. Thanks for bringing awareness to cluster headaches. I've been dealing with them for 10 years now, and they only come around in the late fall, early winter. It's really hard to explain them to others who have never heard of them, and doctors never know what to do about them since they come and go so quickly. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.